I never heard that before.
Yeah, that's must be an update to Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. They establish a general rule regarding Maasros. Whatever is food and is guarded and grows from the soil is liable to Maasros. And they established another general rule. Whatever is food at the beginning and is food at the conclusion, even though it keeps it to increase the food, is liable, whether small or large. But whatever is not food at the beginning, but is food at the conclusion, is not liable until it becomes food.
Right. Just before you carry on, so the klal of Maasros is a little more encompassing than paya, because the Maasros has only got three qualifications.
Right.
Okay, it's got to be food, it's got to be protected, and it's got to grow from the ground. Okay, with do you remember what the two extra things were with paya? Which things are like? Which things?
I'm
What are the
sorry.
extra?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, so for paya, we also had the qualification that it has to be lakitos or ka'achas. It has to be a single harvest.
Okay.
No, it can't be things that you leave bit by bit on the tree. That was one of them. And now I can't remember what the other one was. Let's quickly take a look back to paya, because it's actually worth remembering the distinction. Um, so paya aleph dalet is ochel nishma v'gidulav min haaretz. That's the same as Maasros. Ulakita so ka'achas and also it gets put into a storehouse. So
Okay.
that excludes vegetables that don't stay in a storeroom. It's got to go to the market immediately, and whatever. So you don't need to leave a
Right.
payer on your lettuce patch.
Okay. All right.
Okay, let's go.
When do fruits become liable to Maasros? Figs when they reach the bochal stage, grapes and wild grapes at their incipient maturity, and suma and mulberries when they become red, and all the red fruits when they become red. Pomegranates when they soften, dates when they swell, peaches when they show veins, nuts when they form a store. Yehuda says nuts and almonds when their skin has been formed. Okay, right? Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Okay.
One more.
Carobs, carobs when they form dark spots, and all that are black. When they form dark spots, pears, pippins, quinces, and crab apples when they become smooth, and all that are white when they become smooth. Fenugreek when it is able to grow, grain and olives when they have reached a third. Okay.
Okay. Mishna Dalet Yarak. So when it comes to vegetables, that hakishuim v'adiluim ha'avatichim, that's cucumbers and gourds and watermelons, malafafonos, and hang on, what are malafafonos if not
Cucumber
kishuim?
melons.
Cucumber
Cucumber melons.
melons. Okay, fine. Okay. Um, all of these are kind of in truma hatapuchim v'etrogim. And apples and etrogim, all of them are chayavim gedolim or katanim. Well, even if you pick them young, they're apparently still edible. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that with apples, because like carrots, like baby carrots, even the little baby carrots, you can still eat them. That's for sure. You'd be chayav maasros even if you pick them young. But interesting that it says the same thing about apples and etrogim. Now I wonder why these are mentioned as vegetables as well. Let's just see the etrogim. I wonder if there's any discussion about whether this is some kind of vegetable that's just named the same. No, I don't see that. It's interesting that they should be mentioned along with the vegetables. Anyway, Rabbi Shimon poteres etrogim bekotnan. He says they're not edible when they're small. Therefore, there's no. If you pick them early and you're making some sort of jam out of them because they're, why would you want to anyway? Because this is because whatever you're in a pinch and you need to find some food, so you don't need to take masters of it because that's not the normal time for them to be eaten. Okay, Hachayev b'shkedim hamarim patur b'metukim, v'hachayev b'metukim patur b'marim. You've got two species of almonds. There's the bitter almond and the sweet almond. The bitter almond can only be eaten when it is small. When it grows to its full growth, then it becomes too bitter to eat. So those ones you can only take Maasros when it's small. If you in a pinch and you have to eat them when they're bigger, then there's no Maasros because that's not normal food. And the reverse is true of the sweet almonds, which are inedible when they're small, but are only edible when they've grown fully.
And Reb Shimon exempts the citrons when they're small. He holds that.
I said that earlier. I said
Right, I know.
yeah.
So it's almost like he's going against the almonds. The almonds, the sweet ones are, the small ones only when they're edible. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. He's not talking about the almonds though. He's talking about estrogin.
Right. He says Reb Shimon exempts the citrons when they're small, and he says bitter almonds are liable when they are.
That's not the last is not Rabbi Shimon. The last is the Tanna Kamma again.
Okay.
Rabbi Shimon is only commenting on the estrogin.
All right. Okay. All right.
All right. Ezehu gornan lemasros. What is called the gorin for maser? And the gorin is the gorin when the gorin by wheat. That's remember we talked about miroch hakri. That's when we say things that start the smoothing of the pile. That's when things become liable to master. So when we're using the term hagorin, the gorin is the point when the fruit becomes liable to Maasros in terms of its harvest potential. Let's say there are two things that are required. One is that it has to be ripe. Okay, so the first couple of Mishnahs that we've just been through have been in terms of the fruit's development, the internal development of the fruit. Okay, so even assuming that you have fruit that is properly ripe, there's another requirement for there's another thing that still allows you to eat them casually. Right? If it's still in the field, and remember we've learned this before, that if you're walking through the field and you just feel like taking a snack, you can, and you don't need to take maaser from it.
Right.
But there's a certain point when it's kavua. Now, when it becomes kavua for Maasros, then you're no longer even allowed to take a snack from it, and that's called the goren. Okay, and you're no longer allowed to just eat casually from it. So again, Maasros depends on the requirement of Maasros depends on two things. One, that the fruit is internally fully developed, and two, that in the harvest process you've reached the point of kavua, of the goren.
Right.
Okay. So what's the goren for Maasros? Hakishuim v'adeluim meishe yifakasu. So for the cucumber melons, is that and the diluim and the goods, mishiyafaksu. What's mishiyafaksu? That is mishiyatilu mehem esafikas hainu etase'ar hadakshe alehem. In other words, you cut off the little hairy bits on the ends. Like on a cucumber, you've got the little hairy bit on the end. Apparently, that's they would, to take them to market, they would cut those little bits off so it would look pretty. Okay, so there's a hairy bit on the end that they would cut off. Okay, and if he does not do that, then when he makes it into the pile, okay, then so he also makes similar to the wheat. He smooths over a pile, and that's the kvias for Maasros. Avatiach. So for the watermelon, mishi yishalek. That is shilok abatichim kapikos bekishum v'deloim. It's the same sort of thing where he cuts off the stems or whatever the hairy part is. Okay, until he makes it into a laid out patch. Right. I don't think mukte is it's not a pile. You don't make a pile out of the watermelons apparently, but you lay them out in a special place which is called mukte. Okay, yara kan ne'egad misha yogad. When you have vegetables that are typically bundled, for example, spinach leaves, you typically bundle them you wouldn't sell them leaf by leaf, you'd make them into bundles. As soon as he makes them into bundles, boom, that's they have been mastered. Okay, but if he doesn't tie them up, until he fills up the kli that he's taking them to the market in. And if he's not filling up the whole kli, until he's finished picking everything that he wants to put into the basket. Okay. This is all where he's taking things into market. So he knows, like, if he's taking more than one kli, as soon as he's filled up a kli for the market, boom, that's now chayiv in Maasros, and he's not allowed to snack from it. Okay, and if he's not taking less than one kli, or if it's on the last kli and he's not going to be able to fill it, then as soon as he's finished filling it for what he's going to take to market, boom, that's done. It's now kavua. Okay, kalkala, a basket, ad sheyichapeh. If he's taking a basket of produce until he covers it, and if he's not covering it, until he fills it up. And if he is not going to fill it, same principle. As soon as he's finished with the basket, either by covering it or by filling it or by just having finished picking off everything that he's going to use. But when is all of this said? This is all the above is talking about where somebody is taking his stuff to the market. Okay, why? Because when he's taking stuff to the market, it's not he's not going to wait until he gets to market. For example, if he's walking to market and someone says, "Oh, you've got some spinach over there. I want to buy some spinach. Would he sell to me?" And he says, "Yeah, sure." He doesn't have any issues about selling stuff on the way to market. It's just the market's a convenient place, so he has to make sure that everything is mastered before. But if he's just taking it home to eat at home, if he's just subsistence farming or whatever, and he's not interested in selling it, he just wants to take it home. Then in all of these cases, nothing has been kavua until he actually gets to his house. Because even if somebody comes up to him in the street and says, "Hey, can I buy them?" He says, "I'm sorry, this is not for sale. This is for me. I want to eat this." Right. So therefore, it's not kavua until it actually reaches his home. Once he reaches his home, then that's when the chiyuv of Maasros kicks in. Okay. Hapered. Pered is the dried seeds of a rimon. Atzimokim, raisins. Charuvin, carobs. Mishiyamid arema. So their master kicks in once he makes them into a pile. Habetzalim mishifakel. The onions, again, it's the same sort of idea where he takes off the dried leaves. And if he doesn't do that, mishiyamid arema, when he makes them into a pile. That hatavua, regular produce, grain produce, basically. Mishim arech, when he smooths over the pile. That's the one that we know the best, comes last in the Mishnah over here. And if he doesn't smooth it, until he actually makes it into a pile. Kitnios, legumes, mishi yichbor. Yichbor is the kvara, where he basically sifts them to clean them from the dust and dirt and stones that usually come up with the legumes when he picks them. Okay, and if he doesn't do this, until he smooths over the pile. Afal pishimerech, even though he has already smoothed it, not tell min hakutaim uminat stadim. So even though he's already now smoothed over the pile, and what's in the pile now, he's not allowed to snack from that. Okay. Nonetheless, the Mishnah tells us not tell minakutaim from the shibolim haketuos shenoni doshu. You can take from the ones that weren't properly threshed and didn't separate from their husks well, umin hatzdadim, or from the bits that come on the side. Okay, so they weren't smoothed over. So something fell out of the pile and is on the side. Or if it wasn't properly winnowed from the chaff. Okay, so those little bits that weren't actually part of the ikar miruach hakri, they're still not considered kavua, and he's allowed to pick those up and chew on them without taking master yet. Okay. Zero. Shemos.
Okay.
Shemos Yud Beis.
Okay. Yud Beis. If one grated an apple and put it into dough and it leavened it, it is forbidden. If barley fell into a cistern of water, even though it tainted the water, it's permitted. If one takes out of the warm oven of the oven warm bread and puts it over the mouth of a jar of truma wine, Reb Meir forbids, but Reb Yehuda permits. Reb Yossi permits of wheat, but forbids of barley because barley absorbs. If one heated an oven with cumin of truma and baked in it, and the bread is permitted since there is no taste, but only the aroma of cumin. Okay.
Shavias test.
Test right here. Okay. If one inherited seventh year produce or received it as a gift, Reb Eliezer says it should be given to whoever will eat it. But the sages say the sinner should not benefit; rather, it should be sold to those who eat it, and the money be distributed to anyone. If one eats from seventh year dough before challah has been separated from it, he is guilty of death.
So just again, the Chachamim are not saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. They're just saying to Rabbi Eliezer, your opinion is inconsistent because you're not going far enough. The Chachamim themselves say no, he should be allowed to eat his shvius produce that came to him by Yerusha. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer is a Beis Shammainik. So
Right.
he says that you've got to be machmir. You can't have hakaras atov to somebody who gave you shmita produce, and that includes by Yerusha. So he can't or by matana he can't show any gratitude, and therefore he has to give it away basically. But the Chacham says there's nothing wrong with this. But your position is inconsistent because you're not taking it far enough. If you're saying that he can't benefit from it at all. Okay.
Aleph. The seventh year cancels a loan, whether it is secured by bond or not. Credit granted by a shop is not canceled, and if it was converted into a loan, it is canceled. Rabbi Yehuda says the first is canceled. The wages of a hired worker are not canceled, but if he converted them into a loan, it is canceled. Rabbi Yossi says any work that must cease with the seventh year is canceled, but whatever need not cease with the seventh year is not canceled. If one slaughtered a cow and distributed it on New Year's Day, if the month was intercalculated, it is canceled. But if not, it is not canceled. The violator, the seducer, the slanderer, and any act executed by the court are not canceled. And if one loans against a pledge or hands its bills to the court, they are not canceled.
Okay. That's the prelude to the prosbul, because the whole idea of the prosbul is that the maser, it becomes a maser based in, and therefore does not get cancelled. Okay. Paya base gimel.
Everything forms a division for seeds, but only a fence forms a division for trees. And if the branches are intertwined, it does not form a division, and one gives pay for the whole. And as for carob trees, whichever see one another, Rabbi Gamaliel says, in my father's house they used to give one payah for the olives, and that they had in each direction, and one for the carobs which saw one another. The Eliezer ben Tzadok said in his name, even for the carobs which they had in the entire town. If a person sows his field with one kind, even though he does so with two threshing floors, he gives one payah. If he sowed it with two types, even though he did so in one threshing floor of wheat, of one threshing floor time, he gives two payot. But if a person sows his field with two types of wheat, if he does so in one threshing time, he gives one payah, two threshing times, and he gives two payah.
So basically, that's the middle case. Is the gray area is where he's got two species of wheat which are not kilayim with each other. So, for example, we saw wheat and darnel. We saw this in
Right.
kilayim. They're two different species of wheat. So, if he harvests them all in one shot, he can leave one payah. But if he harvests the wheat and then he harvests the darnel, then he has to leave one payah for each one of them. Okay, that's it. Okay, oalos. Yud Dalet Zayin? Yeah.
If the ledges are less than a handbreadth wide, Tuma penetrates upward and downward regardless of whether there is a handbreadth between them or not, and regardless of whether Tuma is underneath, between, or above. The same rule applies to two curtains that are cubed handbreadth above the ground.
Right, so we missed a whole. I mean, over Shabbos we missed a whole bunch of situations where you've got these two ledges on the wall, where one is where they project out a tefach, and the one projects a little bit more than a tefach. So we had all these situations. But the one of the important things that we want to just remember, an important concept in the olos, is the tumah ritzutza, where something is compressed. When there's, in other words, there's less than tefach in the space. Now, when there's more than a tefach, then that can form an ohel. But if there's less than a tefach, then the tumah is compressed, and therefore it actually breaks through, going upwards
It's upwards.
or downwards, if unless there's an actual ohel below it. So in the case where the lower ledge is more than a tefach out, and it's got more than a tefach below it, then it forms an ohel to block tumah from above. So the tumah ritzutza above can only break out upwards, but not downwards. Okay, let's go on.
A thick garment and a thick beam do not spread tumah unless they are a hand tefach above the ground. The two garments are folded one on top of the other. Tumah does not spread unless the upper one is more than a tefach above the ground. Wooden tables, one above the other, do not spread tumah unless the uppermost one is a tefach above the ground. But if they are made of marble, tumah penetrates directly up and directly down.
Okay, so this is actually another good principle over here. Like think something like clothing. Clothing is not considered as if it's attached to the ground. So it can form an ohel, but it can't block the ohel. Okay, so if, for example, you've got clothing that's piled up, so successive layers of clothing until it's actually got a tefach, until it's over a tefach high. So then the top layer of that clothing is considered as if it's an ohel, and the clothing underneath it doesn't stop it, is considered as if it's empty space. So if, for example, you've got two roofs separate above there, now with a gap of a tefach between them, so now you can't, the tumah doesn't travel from one to the other. But if you've got the clothing in the gap on the floor, and that clothing is now a tefach high, the top layer of the clothing forms another ohel that bridges between the two roofs. So the tumah can pass from this roof under the top layer of the clothing and into the other section. So that's all one big ohel. Unless, and the same goes for wood and for anything else. But when it comes to marble, the last case in the Mishnah, marble is stone, which is ground. It's basically part of the ground. So now that's basically it's not an ohel. It's just part of the ground. So if there's tumah underneath it, it's just a tumah ritzutza. So the tumah underneath it will just break up and break down, and that's it. Okay.
Okay. In the case of wooden tables, a handbreadth above the ground that touch one another at their corners, and there is tumah underneath one tablet. Someone touches the other tablet, becomes tamei for 7 days. Utensils underneath the first tablet become tamei, whereas those under the second remain tahor. A tabletop does not spread tumah unless it extends beyond its base by a handbreadth.
Right. So this Mishnah was a very difficult one. It was difficult to explain how the tumah actually transmitted. I remember we had to actually pull out an art scroll to understand it. I mean, it was two squares that are touching in the corner. So how does the tumah transmit? So they each forms an ohel. If the tumah is underneath the one, if you touch the second one, then you become tamei meis from being in contact. But kalim that are underneath the first one are tamei meis, but underneath the second one they're tahor, which is a fascinating little thing. We don't need to go deeply into it, but it was an interesting thing that the tumah is held is transmitted electrically through the kalim, through the two things. For somebody who's actually touching the ohel itself, but the second one doesn't actually form an ohel for the kalim that are underneath it, as we see that they're tahor.
The pictures they have here are in the kahati. They have two almost.
You don't have kahati there. You've got an art scroll, don't you?
No, this is a kahat. It's an art scroll. It's because the color changed and the other ones. There are two tables, and the corner is touching. One corner is touching each other. That's what you're talking about.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
The following one has a different picture. It just has like a tabletop. Like
Yeah, that's a set. That's the last case in the Mishnah. It's a separate one. That's the shulchan enu mavi'es hatuma ad shetehe bo ribua p'voseach tefach. So if you have a table that doesn't extend, so it's got a middle leg. So it's just got a, like, sort of a picnic table that they've got
right,
in
have a
the
base
parks.
on it, right,
It's got that single stem base. So if it's even if that base is hollow, if we look only at the edges of the table that extend out, if that makes a tefach, then it can be an orhel. But if it's not, then it doesn't form an orhel.
If it extends the tefach out from that
From the
base.
base, it's got to extend a tefach out from the base in order to make an orhel. Even though the tabletop itself is much more than a tefach, but if the base itself is taking up the space, then the edges are not the edges don't join with what's under the base.
Okay. Avodah
Avodah Zarah, Daled Hay.
Daled Hay. How does he nullify it? If he cut off the tip of its ear, the tip of its nose, the tip of its finger, or he dented it, even though he did not diminish it, he has nullified it.
This is, by the way, this is a goy. It is specifically about a goy being mevatel and Avodah Zarah.
If he if he spit in front of it, urinated in front of it, dragged it through the mud or threw excrement at it, it is not nullified.
And he has to actually make a physical change to it so that it's damaged. He can't just show disrespect to it.
If he sold it or gave it as a pledge, Rebbe says he has nullified it, but the Chachamim say he has not nullified it. An idol that was abandoned by its worshippers, if this occurred in time of peace, it is permitted for the benefit. In time of war, it is permitted for benefit. In time of war, it is prohibited. Royal pedestals are permitted because they erect them only when the kings pass. They asked the elders in Rome if he does not want idol worship, why does he not make it cease? The sages said to them, if the idolaters would worship something which the world would need, it would make it cease. But they worship the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations. Should he destroy his world? Because to the fools, they said to the sages, if so, let him destroy the idolatrous things which the world does not need, and leave the idolatrous things which the world does need. They said to them, then we too would lend support to the worshippers of these, because they would say, you must perceive the proof that they are gods, for they have not ceased. Okay.
Good logic.
Yes. And Yevamos.
Yevamos.
Okay.
Gimel Zayin.
Gimel Zayin. If there were 3 brothers, and 2 of them were married to 2 sisters, when one was married to a stranger, if the husband of one of the sisters died, and the one married to the stranger married his wife, and the wife of the second one then died, and then the one married to the stranger died, she is forbidden to him forever, since she was once forbidden to him. If there were 3 brothers, and 2 of them were married to 2 sisters, while one was married to a stranger, if the husband of one of the sisters divorced his wife, and then the one who was married to the stranger died, and the divorced brother married her and then died, about this it was said, if any of them died or were divorced, their co-wives are permitted. If any of them had been subject to the question of betrothal or divorce, the co-wives require chalitza and may not be taken in yibum. How is it that the betrothal was in question? If he threw the betrothal to her and there is a doubt as to whether it was closer to him or closer to her, this is a question of betrothal. How is it that the divorce was in question? If he wrote a bill of divorce in his own hand, but without witnesses, or with witnesses but without a date, or with a date but with only one witness, there is a question of divorce. If 3 brothers were married to 3 strangers, and one of them died, and then the second performed amama with her and also died, they require chalitza but may not be taken in yibum. As it is stated, if one of them dies, her husband's brother shall come to her. Only a widow who is attached by one brother's bond is subject to yibum, not a widow who is attached by 2 brothers' bonds. Reb Shimon says he may perform yibum with whichever one he wishes, but he must then perform chalitza with the other. If 2 brothers were married to 2 sisters, and one of them died, and the second one's wife died, she is forbidden to him forever because she was once forbidden to him. So once she's forbidden to him, then that's it.
Right. So because if she was forbidden to him at one stage ever, and even though the Isser subsequently disappeared because she was married to the so again, let's say Shnei Achin Nesuin L'Shtei Achayos. So the 2 brothers are married to 2 sisters, and the one brother dies, and afterwards his own wife dies. So now he's allowed to marry his wife's sister once his wife has died. But since when she fell to him to Yibum, she was asked to him as Eishes Ach, because because he wasn't allowed to marry her because his own wife was alive. Then even after his own wife dies, the Isser doesn't go away. And what's more, it's not just a Dorabanan, it's a Doraisa, because now once the wife is free to go, the wife of the first husband is free to go without Yibum or Chalitza. She doesn't now suddenly need a Chalitza from him just because her sister died.
Okay.
I know. I love Yuvamas. It's like it's brain food. You just get the rules. You get the rules right. You understand what the principles are, and it all just works out so nicely.
But I don't think it would work today. So
No, but we still have I mean we still do chalitza today,
right,
and
yeah.
it's important to know, like, who do you need to do chalitza to, who do you not need to do chalitza to.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I knew somebody who did Kalitza, so who had Kalitza done with her.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Okay.
Have a great day. Enjoy, and
Wonderful.
I'll see you on Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.
There's Rat Hashem.
Thank you. Be
Bye.
well.